Okay, welcome back, committee. Welcome representatives from the Department of Disabilities, Aging and Independent Living. Appreciate everyone being here this afternoon. Sorry, that made me chuckle. So we will do a brief round of introductions just to make sure everybody knows. I don't think we had Deputy Commissioner at the previous introduction. So, and I don't think Mr. Kelly was here at that previous overview. So I'm going to wait just for, I know that we have, more people coming back. So we'll do introductions briefly. For committee members, I just wanted to highlight that we remain live until you hear me say we're signing off, and wrapping up the committee. So be helpful for people not to just all start standing up and, talking and putting your coats on and stuff like that. So when you hear me wrap up and say, thank you, Lori, that's when you see that little red light go off up there that says live, then people can move around the cabin. All right. That's just a reminder. Commissioner, I think we will just go ahead and do introductions now. And I think most of us, but just to make sure, Teresa Wood from Waterbury, also serving Bolton, Buell Score, and Huntington.
Jessica Brimstead from Shelburne and St. George.
Hi, Taylor Small from Winooski.
Greg Garofano, Essex and Essex Junction.
Noah Hyman, South Burlington, Edwards.
Kelly Sayala, Londonderry, Andover, and Winhall.
Julie McGill, Bridport, Middlebury, New Haven, and Woodbridge.
James Gregoire, Fairfield, Fletcher, Bakersfield.
Dan Noyes, Wolcott, Hyde Park, Johnson, and Belvedere.
And Representative Donnie, who should be joining us shortly, and Representative Whitman did indicate that he had an appointment, so he was going to be slightly late. And then if we could just come around the outside with Ms. Sabernagel, that'd be awesome.
Okay, Rebecca Silvernagle.
And I'm Megan Tierney Ward, the Deputy Commissioner at Dale.
Bill Kelly, Finance Director at Dale.
Helen Laban, Executive Director of the Vermont Healthcare Association.
Matthew Grote, Legislative Assistant for Action Service.
And I'm Lori, Committee Assistant.
Great, thank you. Committee members, we do have, you received on your desk a paper copy of the presentation. It is also on our website. And the floor is all yours, Madam Commissioner.
All right. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. For the record, Monica White, the Commissioner of the Department of Disabilities, Aging, and Independent Living, also known as DALE. So I will try the share screen, which worked before.
Okay.
So we can have lightning strike twice here.
And please let us know when you would like, it might be helpful if you indicated when you would like questions or clarification. So, usually in your presentations, there's, maybe a natural pause site. We'll leave that up to you. And until that time, I'll just ask people to hold questions, write them down, and then so we don't interrupt you all the time.
Okay, I appreciate that. So I think, so to start, to level set, much of the information that we have in our budget testimony is information that I previously shared in the Dale 101 session for kind of the orientation that I was here for a couple of weeks ago. So I will not spend time going into that deep dive level, and I would encourage you with all of your free time if you browse the document, it does link to various points of interest. And so all of that to say, I think I've got 59 pages here. I'm not going to go through reading 59 pages today, but kind of just going through at a highlight. And I'm also doing a juggling act of scrolling here and flipping through my notes here. So I will try to, it might take me a minute or two to get into the rhythm. So starting on page 3. So the department overview, and just stating for the testimony record that Dale's mission is to make Vermont the best state in which to grow old or to live with a disability with dignity, respect, and independence. And that mission does permeate throughout everything that we do across our 5 divisions, across the commissioner's office, across the multiple programs that we either administer or oversee throughout our entire book of business. And it's important to us that we kind of return to that mission with really everything that we do. And our budget decisions that we put forth in the governor's recommended budget are predicated on meeting that mission for the department. And so, again, I did share much of this information in the overview, and out of respect of everyone's time, not necessarily repeating myself in that, but so we have the 5 divisions: Adult Services Division, Division for the Blind and Visually Impaired, Developmental Disability Services Division, a Division of Licensing and Protection, and Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, also known as Higher Ability Vermont. And so our appropriations across those programs underneath, we'll get to what the construct is of that as we scroll along here. When I was here previously, I spoke to our commitment that Vermont, the state of Vermont, has made to individuals with disabilities and to older Vermonters, and some of the legislation at both the state and federal level that governs the work that we do, and links to those are here for you to, again, with all of your free time, but to the extent that you are interested in looking more at that, there are links to those governing laws and statutes here. Scrolling into the page 4. So we have the document here at the very end of the document. It's not something that I'm going to get into, but it's available for your review and consideration, is some of our outcome metrics, the work that we do really across all of our programs related to how well folks are doing. Are people better off? How well did we do it? How much? That information is in the very in the back pages of the program summary, and it speaks to it at a high level here. But more detailed measures and program outcomes are in the back of the document. Some highlights for us over the past year to be aware of: we have had a number of leadership changes. For those of you that were here last year, the changes that we have for our key leadership are listed here. We had Jen Garabedian join us. Actually, her 1-year anniversary with us was earlier this week as Developmental Disability Services Division Director. Brian Guy, who joined us in the role of Director of Operations, was an internal promotion from Higher Ability. Our very own Rebecca Silvernagel was previously here in the House as staff in the House of Representatives, and she joined us at the on Halloween. Actually, was her first date. It's easy to remember her starting date.
I just want to know if she's done, staff photos or anything, any photo shoots.
We're working on it.
Yeah.
Yes, she did do a replacement headshot for me, which I appreciated because my previous one was a mid-pandemic selfie in my home office. Made it a lot of work. And our final key leadership change is Jason Palapida, who joined us as our State Unit on Aging Director just last month, actually, who replaced Connor O'Day, who accepted an internal promotion to join the Medicaid Policy Unit at the Department of Vermont Health Access. So it's entirely possible that you'll be meeting any or all of these key leaders along with our other division directors as the session rolls along.
And for our contacts, Representative Noyes and Representative Garofano will continue to be your budget liaisons in terms of ongoing work as we delve into your department's budget.
Great. Thank you. All right, so moving along to the next page. So just an overview that Dale has continued to have an active role in the COVID-19 response. I believe I mentioned in my department overview that we have hired 2 limited service positions through health department grant, but those positions are living within Dale specifically to focus on COVID situations in long-term care settings and across a number of metrics to include the emergency staffing pool, personal protective equipment, and that sort of thing. And that resource continues to be very well leveraged across the systems of care. This is something that I do want to highlight here. So in addition to that kind of ongoing COVID response work for situations, outbreaks as they come up, one of the key focuses of the department has been on recovery and revitalization. And we have approached that from a number of lenses to include targeted Medicaid rate increases and reviews, emergency financial relief, workforce recruitment and retention, and crisis capacity and hospital flow across our systems of care. So approaching both the acute needs as well as the longer term stabilization, recovery, revitalization. And we have a link here to some of the efforts that we have been engaged in more detail. I also want to just share a bit of information about our deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind services. I believe I spoke to this previously, but in summary, Laura Siegel was hired a couple of years ago now in the role of Director of Deaf, Hard of Hearing, and Deafblind Services, which is a position that, as I understand it, many years ago existed, and then it didn't, but we got it back a couple of years ago. And so there had been a pretty significant period of time where we did not have someone in that role. Laura hit the ground running. She joined us from the Vermont Center for Independent Living. She herself is deaf, and the data is here for what we've received for referrals for assistance for individuals in particular. Laura has also been very proactive and dynamic in working with entities across the state to include State House staff in helping to increase accessibility for persons who are deaf or hard of hearing. There's a lot of work to do on that front to make sure that we all, the royal we, are as accessible as possible, and Laura has been a key leader in that effort.
I do just want to extend our thanks for her assistance, particularly last year during the hearing aid bill and both the testimony that was taken in the House Healthcare Committee and improving accessibility during that process. And then when we got to the floor, we had definitely efforts to work with our House operations staff and understanding how to make the State House more accessible for people. So I appreciate her work. And I understand she also is working with a group of individuals about potentially looking at a specialized residential services group home kind of thing for people who are deaf blind or people with hearing loss.
So we
group around that
have submitted a request for proposals, and actually this, Megan, I might phone a friend and tap you in to speak more articulately to the status of that if I could.
Yes, so
Thank you.
Again, Megan Tierney Ward, Deputy Commissioner at Dale. Laura's role has been to help that group of parents have a voice in the work that's happening with the housing alternatives for developmental services. So through the system of care plan and then through that work, it's really the same kind of work, but it's unique to people who are deaf, blind, or hard of hearing. So those are a lot of adult people in our program who still live with their parents, and one of the only ways they can really have great communication is through their family. So this is a vision they have, which is to have services in a place after the parents are gone where they can get supports in one home.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And then I'm really, really excited about the hearing aid bill for a number of reasons, but on a personal level, I myself am hard of hearing and I have an appointment to get my first set of hearing aids next month. So I'm super thrilled about that. And so are my staff who are constantly having. Like, okay. So yeah, that is definitely great work. All right, so moving along to page 6, we have a number of our other initiatives that I just want to speak to at a high level include our work on the Vermont Action Plan for Aging Well, and that is born out of the Older Vermonters Act of 2020, which was really landmark legislation in focusing on what will it take to truly make Vermont the best state in which to grow old, and a number of principles there. So we work very closely in concert with our partners at the Vermont Department of Health, and convened an advisory committee for working on development of this action plan for aging well. We held a number, I believe it was 6 listening sessions statewide for older Vermonters, to share what it means to them to age well and to solicit that feedback, as well as online, and really a lot of work on this front. And there's a link here to the landing page that has all of the information about meeting minutes and agendas and that sort of thing for review. Another area that is a key focus for us is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so both internally, how are we doing business within our staff, how to assure that we are truly a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce. What are those points that we are hitting? What are we missing? What can we do better? So we've engaged staff at multiple levels throughout our organization to serve in a task force to help line up areas where we can take action to do better as an employer. Additionally, we are at the table for a number of external initiatives related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. The initiatives led by Susanna Davis at the statewide level. Health equity is extraordinarily important, and the intersection of health and disability and aging, to not look at those in isolation, but really making sure that we are in all of our programs having that targeted DEI focus on what we do, what can we do better.
Thank you for pointing this out and sort of highlighting this, and I think it's particularly apropos to Dale, given the racial disparities we have, but also the disparities in equity and inclusion that we have for older Vermonters and individuals with disabilities, which is, primary to the mission of the department. So you kind of have a multifaceted role in helping both within your workforce, but also all Vermonters to experience more equity and inclusion. So thank you.
Yes, no, thank you. And then one of the areas that we are looking to stabilize within our workforce is our Office of Public Guardian. And I'll speak to we can speak to this in greater detail subsequently, but our Office of Public Guardian out of all of our units has had an exponential increase in cases over the past couple of decades, whereas we've actually lost positions due to rescission, due to, I believe, the retirement incentive a couple of years ago hit. And so kind of those conflating factors has resulted in an average caseload for the Office of Public Guardian at 30 clients per guardian, and supervisors carrying that same load, whereas the national standard is 20 clients per guardian and 10 clients per guardian supervisor. So to begin to address that unsustainable and extraordinarily challenging, not just for our staff, but for the folks who are under public guardianship, our budget this year requests 3 additional guardian positions to begin to tackle that imbalance, what we consider an imbalance. And then in terms of quality management, so this is a topic that came up in last year's legislative session and was included in Act 186/H720 from last year, which was the requirement for Dale to submit legislative reports about quality assurance and oversight for home and community-based services programs for individuals with developmental disabilities. And so we have done that. We submitted a report in November and then one last month. And those reports point out, they provide information as requested, as well as fleshing out the broader issue of home and community-based services across multiple programs, not just developmental services. And we've not requested additional positions in this proposed budget in light of the conversations with CMS, the federal oversight entity. It's reasonable to anticipate that when the conversations with CMS conclude, that additional quality management staffing and practices will need to be in alignment with what CMS directs. And it's reasonable to anticipate that would include additional positions, but we're not there yet.
Are you at a pause place?
I am absolutely at a pause place.
Okay, Representative Garofano.
Two questions. Thank you, Madam Chair. The Office of Guardians, the 3 positions, are you anticipating that those will bring the numbers, the caseloads to this national standard of 20 per?
No, it will not bring them to the national standard of 20 and 10, but it will get us closer to that. And somewhere in my binder, I have what it will get us to, but I can get that to you without giving myself multiple paper cuts in the.
That's fine.
Awesome.
You can send it.
I know we have it.
My second question is the CMS and the anticipation of, I'm assuming, increased funding from CMS. Is that for the home and community-based services? The reason why you're not requesting for additional positions, when is that anticipated?
So from a timing perspective, we should hear within a matter of months, is my understanding, that we will hear from CMS weeks to months, is what the expected timing is that we will hear from them, or specifically what the quality measures and oversight mechanics will need to be for all of our home and community-based services programs.
And you anticipate that once you have that guidance from CMS, then you will ask for positions to bring us to that level?
The mechanics of how we will go about that are to be determined, but once we do receive that clarity from CMS, we'll have no choice but to come into compliance with whatever those requirements are from CMS, and that will be clear and candid and share that when we have that information from the federal government.
Representative McGill.
I was just gonna ask the same question about timeline, so.
Okay, well, I'm going to follow up.
Yes, I thought you might, Madam Chair.
Okay. Took a deep breath and counted to 10. I'm just letting you know. Yeah. So of course we know that CMS is, federal oversight. And I guess my question to you, Commissioner, is, do you feel currently right now that you have sufficient staff to provide quality oversight and assurances that the health and safety and the services that we are paying for, we, the global we, do you have sufficient staff to do that now?
Under our current practices, yes.
And are you able to visit on-site visits to designated and specialized service agencies annually?
Annually, no, there's a cycle for that. I'm trying to find my the legislative reports that provide the specifics. They're somewhere in my binder.
That's okay. I guess I'm finding it troubling. That might be an understatement. Finding it troubling that we don't see a request for positions for increased quality oversight that even the designated agencies are asking for. I'm just going to leave it at that for right now. We'll take it up further, I'm sure, in the detailed, conversations that you have. But it's troubling to this committee and to the body. We received multiple comments and questions and issues that are concerns. Thank you. I was looking for the C word and it wasn't coming up. From constituents, family members, from community members, and I'm just going to be blunt and say that's insufficient to wait for CMS to respond. We need to do something in Vermont prior to CMS. And yes, we might need to adjust to make sure that we're doing exactly what they expect us to do. But as Vermonters, we expect oversight. Never mind what CMS expects. So I'm just putting that out there that's an area you can expect further dialogue about.
Absolutely happy to have the discussions. So thank you.
Okay.
All right. So moving along. So still on page 7. At a high level, there are 2 statute revisions that we either have or will be requesting for update during this legislative cycle. The first of which I spoke to previously and is already in the works relative to an update into the Adult Protective Services statute, which is older than I am, presently in dire need of revision. So we're very grateful to the legislature for also agreeing that it is well past time for an update. And then the second is something that is relatively minor, not quite housekeeping, but kind of relative to changing some statutory changes to accurately reflect the status of deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind services and use of the statewide American Sign Language interpreter contract. No budget impact anticipated. Looking to also change some wording in statute according to current use of the terminology of deaf, hard of hearing, deafblind services. So that's something I'd like to follow up with probably you, Madam Chair, offline, just to say this is what we'd be looking for and familiarize you with that.
Okay. And just to give you an update, I know that Representative, he would be saying this if he were here, but the APS statute changes were just released for introduction. So you should see that bill pop up early next week.
Oh, great. Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
And we have already committed to taking that up.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. So moving into our division testimony. And so for our 5 divisions, I did provide an overview just when I was here a couple of weeks ago. So I'm not going to go through these components in great detail, but it includes the philosophy for each division, an overview, focus on staff and partners, and programs and services. Who do we serve? So I guess I will kind of just do that really high level overview rather than spending our limited time today and going through each of those pieces in great detail. However, if anyone has any questions on any of these, I'd be happy to pause. Rolling to page 9, just highlighting some of the more recent developments and accomplishments in our adult services division. One piece that was a big body of work for us last year was review and revision rather of our state plan on aging, which is a requirement under the Federal Older Americans Act. And we developed a revision for effective federal fiscal years 23 through 26 state plan on aging, a very, very large body of work. And so that is in place and new. I already spoke to the work that we've been engaged with on the Vermont Action Plan for Aging Well with the Department of Health, but also representation really from from multiple sectors across the state, including an external to state government. And then a big focus for the Adult Services Division and also for Developmental Services Division is working on the Vermont's enhanced FMAP spending plan, and that's the one-time body of funds, the ARPA funding. It goes by all sorts of different acronyms, but the enhanced FMAP spending plan with strategies to strengthen the home and community-based services system across all of those systems of care. And so a couple of focuses that have been launched are noted here. Continuation of a higher cap for assistive technology and home modification funds for Choices for Care participants, and a contract for an accessibility pilot to identify and provide home modifications needed to support individuals' mobility and independence needs in shared living homes. So that's across multiple programs. Those are just a couple of the pieces of work that's happening at an agency level for that enhanced FMAP spending plan. And I missed one. Also, a contract with Health System Transformation to coordinate a working group to consider extending home and community-based services to a broader cohort of Vermonters and develop a report of recommendations as required by Act 167 of last year. And I believe that report is due in December of this year. I need to look at that, look back at that date to say for sure. Also, we have been engaged very closely with our partners across the agency, Agency of Human Services, Department of Vermont Health Access, Department of Mental Health, and both Adult Services Division and Developmental Disability Services Division within DAIL, specifically on coming into compliance with conflict of interest in case management work. And so we've worked very closely on that front. Is it really an agency initiative? We're also working very closely with AHS on quality HCBS assurances for quality services. So related to what I had spoken to previously. We have done our Money Follows the Person program, which is a specific federal grant program that has been in existence for, I'm not exactly sure how many years now, multiple years, to focus specifically on helping individuals who are in a skilled nursing facility to transition into a home or community-based setting if they choose. And we're working on a number of pilots to address unmet needs, such as the caregiver workforce shortage. So one pilot that we are just launching is a scholarship program for individuals who are looking to attain credentials and training, who are also interested in providing this home-based care. That is a partnership with Hireability and Money Follows the Person program. Just launched that. We're hoping to get a press release out soon to spread the word about that as an option of $5,000 scholarship. So that's just one example of the work that we're doing to really take a targeted approach at some of the problems that we're seeing across our system to see what might be replicated more broadly to address some of the systemic problems that we have. We have been working with the Department of Vermont Health Access on the rate methodology report that will be coming your way in middle of February 15th is the due date. Working very closely on that for a number of providers. And we have also targeted attention specifically on communities where adult day services providers have had gone out of business or ceased operating. So in Rutland and in Barre, and then also a virtual forum to determine how we as a state could build that capacity for that important service. Has been a focus for us. We continue to work with the agency on the implementation of the federally required electronic visit verification, which has been a significant project over the past several years. And reframing aging. So just kind of throwing, that has been a consistent focus for us, is to not necessarily, or to not equate aging with vulnerability, because just because someone might be older does not mean that they are necessarily vulnerable. So really, you know, that is a part of the work that we have ahead of us to make Vermont the best state in which to grow old, is to have a positive focus on aging, and that includes language, because words do matter. So that's a lot of about the adult services, and the focus direction include building off of the work that we've done. I'm not going to repeat myself with that. Although one thing that I would like to add here is the area agencies on aging over the pandemic initiated a really great program called Get Set Up, and that helped older Vermonters who might not have had experience with computers or internet and getting online when everyone was remote. It was really, really critical to have competency in so to have the equipment and have competency in being able to access the world as we knew it when we were all living behind these screens. And so the area agency initiated that Get Set Up program, which has been enormously well received. So continuing collaborations with the area agencies on aging, as well as an evidence-based caregiver assessment tool. So,
Does now seem like since you're mid-division or done with that division, it seems like Representative Garofano?
Thank you. On the community meetings for the adult day services, is there a report or like a summary of the feedback that you received that you would be, not at this moment, but would be able to share?
Yes, I'm sure that we could, yes, we can provide summaries of that. I think there were, at least in the Rutland area, I know offhand that there's a lot of very robust participation there, and we've heard of an entity who might be interested in opening in some capacity down there. That's like very, very new news that they did participate in that community forum. And so, but yes, we'd be happy to provide add that to the list of follow-ups to give you information on those forums.
Thank you. Representative Donahue.
Thanks. Under your developments and work in the past year, did Dale provide in terms of people with traumatic brain injury and older Vermonters developing dementia similar? Did you provide input or work with on the forensic work group?
We, the forensic work group for mental health, yes, we did have participation. Our general counsel, Stuart Scher, represented Dale on that.
Thank you.
Questions? Okay, I have one. I'm just wondering, I know that there's been several rate studies for different aspects of services in the adult services division, particularly around choices for care services. And I'm just wondering to what extent that work is incorporated into your FY24 budget.
So I will say for our 24,
except for nursing homes, we understand they have a separate process. I'm sort of speaking to all those things that are not nursing home related.
Right. So I will say that we have a line item for a $3 million rate increase for home health agencies in the governor's recommended budget. And other than that's the item that we have in our budget for rate increases. And the report, the rate methodology report that will be forthcoming in February will delineate for a number of other providers to include adult day, ACCS and ERC, which is Assisted Community Care Services and Enhanced Residential Care. And I know I'm missing some. Megan, can I call on you? Like, what am I missing for the provider types that are included in?
You got the provider types for home health that covers the services they provide under choices for care. Personal care, homemaker.
Thank you.
So that is separate from the nursing services request that they made during budget adjustment. Is that correct? So what you're speaking to is in addition to that?
Yes, I think that is accurate. So you're talking about the, was it $2.1 million that House Human Services recommended adding for
the LUPA payments that impact high tech and home-based nursing? It's different than that one. That's just one. So there's no rate increases in here for particularly interested in ACCS residential care and enhanced residential care, which I know that group of providers has provided a lot of detailed information to Dale. And honestly, they thought they had sort of reached agreement with the administration on what the next steps were for increasing those rates. And I mean, I know we don't need to tell you how many facilities we've lost in the last, 18 months to 2 years. And it's worrisome, that we can't afford to continue to lose that kind of support for older Vermonters. And I understand you needed to think about priorities, and it's just troublesome that we're going through all of this effort to understand what the true costs are for providing these services, and then being really selective about where we choose to address it. And I think it's difficult. I realize it's a difficult priority setting process, and home and community-based services just don't seem to stack up in the priority process. That's what it seems like anyway.
So definitely look forward to some robust dialogue and conversation when we have that rate methodology report come out in just a couple of weeks. One thing that I also did want to say, so while yes, it is true that we've had a number of facility closures in the past couple of years, we've also had some facility openings in the past couple of years. It doesn't quite wash in terms of bed numbers, but we have had new facilities become licensed as a residential care home or assisted living residence. And of course, it certainly is always disruptive to the people who are, residing in a facility when there is a closure. And we're acutely aware of that, but just also making it known that there have been a number of new, I believe about a dozen over the past couple of years, new facilities that have come on board and become licensed as residential care or assisted living residences. So just for a sense of perspective on the capacity issue.
Sure. And do those new homes accept Medicaid?
Yeah, some do, a couple do not, some do. So it's varied.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm kind of particularly focused on the Medicaid population here. So, and I'm sure Representative Garofano and Noyes will dig deeper into that and have those conversations. So thank you.
Great. So, all right, just being cognizant of time, I might do a more higher level flyby for some of the other points that we have here. And again, happy to answer any questions that folks might have offline as going through it. But this is getting to some of the results, how well, better off across our program. So I'm not going to dive into those here in the interest of time. And then I think for our other 5 divisions, I'll also maybe pick up the pace just a little bit because we, again, recognizing you have to get on the floor at 3.
Thank you.
And I'm looking at my little clock here. So the next division in our budget testimony document is our division for the blind and visually impaired. This is our smallest division, but it is no less important than any other. They do phenomenal work. I spoke to some of the initiatives when I was here a couple of weeks ago. And again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through that in great detail here, but just note that some of our great work is, there's links to some of the news stories that have run for some of our events, information about some of our programs and that sort of thing here. So in the interest of brevity, I will zoom through.
I'm just going to ask just one general question because I think this came up in the overview that you provided. It's probably just important for people to have an understanding that DBVI really is focusing on work and employment, and I guess not as much as on maybe a full cadre of supports and services that people may or may not need, whether it be residential support or case management that's not related to work. Is that accurate?
Generally, yes. And we partner with external organization, several external organizations, but to include the Vermont Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired, VABVI, and we do work, independent living services is part of the scope of work for this division, including a rehabilitation associates who meet with individuals to discuss their goals and plans for independence. And oftentimes there are situations where a person is not born blind or visually impaired, but they have that visual impairment or blindness occur later in life. And so that is part of the book of business, and in addition to the employment supports that we work to provide.
Thanks.
Okay, so again, each each division is the information in the budget testimony is structured much the same way in terms of the high-level overview of the work, as well as including information about the division, the partners, and results. So rapidly firing through that. And the next on page 18 is starting on our Developmental Disabilities Services Division. Myself-oriented here. I'm actually doing better at balancing both the screen and my binder than I thought that I would.
Amazingly well.
So first I came in, I was hit by an overwhelming sense of dread. Like, how can I do it? But I had no technology explosions, so celebrate the wins. So again, I think for this division, this is in terms of dollars, and I'll get to those when we get to the budget parts in the later part of the document here. But for context, in terms of dollars, our Adult Services Division, Developmental Disability Services Division have the largest chunks of the Dale budget. So just for context on that front. Again, just wanting to make sure that we have enough time to get into the budget numbers. Kind of doing a very, very fast zip through of these items, maybe getting to the future directions. Maybe that's a good place to just pause and spend some time on Developmental Disability Services Division. So that is on the bottom of page 20. and I believe that we included it previously, but last year, or over the past couple of years, we undertook a significant process to update our state system of care plan, which went into effect at the beginning of this month. We had not updated it for a period of a couple of years, primarily pandemic associated, putting that behind schedule. But as part of that work, we engaged in some significant stakeholder outreach. We heard pretty loud and clear about a year and a half ago that we had not been as mindful as we should have been about stakeholder input. And so we really put our nose to the grindstone on the stakeholder input part for the update of the state system of care plan. I believe we had 16 different stakeholder input sessions, including targeted focus on various segments of, very specific issues specifically. And as part of that, some of the outcomes for what we are focusing on are reflected here. So one of them is workforce. And so at the agency level, we have focused a number of initiatives on workforce development, staff recruitment, retention, that sort of thing. And also to include a focus on designated specialized service agencies as a whole, but really drilling down to still needing to have a very targeted focus on developmental services staff and ensuring that the developmental disability services workforce has a targeted focus itself. And so how are we looking to address that is definitely one of the priorities within this division. And so moving along to the Office of Public Guardian caseload, I spoke to that earlier. So stabilizing or increasing the number of staff within the Office of Public Guardian so that we are able to conduct the duties that we are required to conduct when a person is under public guardianship safely, and that the person is receiving the level of services that are required, and that we are able to do what we need to do because the current levels are unsustainable.
Commissioner, I just noticed that it was referencing in that section 19 and 5 is 24 and 30 staff. I know that there's an administrative staff person, and what are the other staff associated with that?
So I think
FPs, are they in there?
Those would not be in these numbers.
No.
Because the rep pays are focused specifically on the financial piece. They don't conduct a guardianship role.
And so it says there are 30 staff and 19 and 5 is 24. And I'm just wondering what the other staff positions are.
Oh, I got it. Okay. So, yes. So those who are not, guardians or supervisors would include, we have 2 representative payee / community financial specialist positions. We have an administrative assistant, and we can certainly get the breakout of what positions we currently have.
I was just looking to see whether you had org charts, and I see you have one for the department overall. If we could get one for each division, that would be awesome.
Yeah, we have that available.
Okay, thank you.
That's true.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. On page 20, before the DDSD future directions, I just noticed that the last paragraph there talks about the CMS rejecting Vermont's 5-year plan for the conflict interest case management. So can you just talk a little bit more about that and what the plans are?
Yes, I can do that at a high level. And what I would suggest, and I was in Senate Health and Welfare this morning, and boy, I'm really going to be Dylan Fraser's favorite person, like offering him up. But he is. I've had just conversations with him, and he's offered to come in to provide a more detailed overview specifically of conflict-free case management and the state's timeline and compliance for that initiative. So not to throw that all the way to Dylan, but he, I think, is better positioned because it is an initiative across the agency. So not just DS or not just Dale. But I will say that from a timing perspective, we contracted with a vendor in November. I believe HMA Have Management Associates is the name of the vendor, to facilitate the initiative of what is it going to take for Vermont, what changes need to happen for Vermont's HCBS system to come into compliance. And so that work has commenced just this month. The agency, are soliciting input on the advisory committee for that body of work. And then over the course of this calendar year, working to draft what the draft implementation plan is to be available in January of 24. But yes, I think I would, in terms of, having the right at the fingertips answers to specific questions about that, I think it would be best to have Dylan come in.
And I'm sorry, what was Dylan's last name?
Frazier.
Frazier, okay.
And he's the Deputy Director of Medicaid Policy. I think the last time I mentioned his name here, I gave him a completely different title, which I realized was walking out of the room that I gave him either a promotion or a demotion. I wasn't sure which.
One or the other.
I was like, oh, sorry, Dylan. But I believe it's Assistant Director of Medicaid Policy.
Okay. And I have just before, I guess maybe you're going to get to it on payment reform. You kind of skip forward on the payment reform, but I see it's coming up again. So I'll wait till you get to that.
All right. And then, so similarly, for our payment reform work, we are continuing down that road. And in terms of timeline, that roughly aligns with the home community-based services conflict of interest work, in that we will have more information. And actually, I missed this in the draft. It's not seek approval from the legislature, but it's seeking input related to the.
I thought you changed your mind.
No, I hadn't. I just missed that.
Well, we can take care of that. So I have,
Sure.
And we passed that bill out of here already. We did that on our second week to fix up that error made last year. So in the sort of introductory paragraph on this division on payment reform, you outline, what the goal of the payment reform is: transparent, equitable, effective. That's manageable and supports the philosophy and aligns with the broader payment and healthcare reform goals. It doesn't say anything about reflecting actual costs. And that's a problem. I mean, we have a system that is built on a deck of cards, and I've used this analogy already, but the bottom layer is already crumbled and the rest of it is crumbling. And I'm just, I guess providing our feedback and attention to the fact that one of our roles is to determine how much, the state can afford to pay. We don't know that unless we know what the actual costs are. And so then that decision, doesn't only rest with the administration. We need the information to be able to determine we're at 80% of what it costs. We're at 70%. We're at 90%. Honestly, we have no clue where we are. And that's not how we should be running state government. So I understand, the administration's reluctance about, I guess it doesn't feel transparent. I guess that's what I'm going to say. It doesn't feel transparent to us in terms of this payment reform process and understanding, when I look at the ultimate goal, we won't achieve any of those things unless we have community-based providers that we partner with, and we won't have them unless we address the cost issue.
So for that, I think we would be happy to come in and have a targeted discussion specifically on payment reform, to include Jessica Bernard, who directs that initiative within our office at Dale. So to be able to have that broader overview of those efforts, we'd be glad to come in to
Great, thanks. Adding to my list of agenda items.
Right, wow, we are filling up your dance.
I know, that's right.
Okay, so, okay, so, back on page 21. So following the passage of Act 186/H720 last year, one focus that we have had is to pull together the residential housing alternatives governance committee, which has been assembled over the past several months. And then last month, we hired Julie Abrahamson as the residential program developer for the division, which we are extraordinarily excited about. She actually came in to observe some testimony earlier this year, and she has hit the ground running and done is looking forward to getting the pilot planning grants constructed and out the door as we look to explore alternatives for residential options.
And how far along are we, like, in creating the steering committee and, putting out RFPs and things like that?
Sure. So
I know she's new.
She is new, but we didn't wait for her to get the steering committee started. So we started in either July or August soliciting membership for the steering committee. And I believe the first meeting for that was either in August or September. I'd have to look back and see. So that committee has been in the works for several months now. I would need to go to have a up-to-the-minute update on where we are for the RFPs. We'll need to add that to the list of items to get back to you.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So another initiative that is a nearer term focus for us came out of the input sessions for the State System of Care Plan update, which was the desire to have a dedicated ombuds service for persons receiving developmental services. And so where that is at is a draft of a pilot program with Vermont Legal Aid has been drafted, and it has to go through the approval process through the federal government for the HCBS FMAP spending plan. So that's in the works, but focusing on development of an ombuds program pilot for DS was one of the things that we heard, and this is one of what we're looking to do.
And I'm presuming, but I realize I shouldn't presume anything, but it was Green Mountain Self Advocates involved in the discussions around, what they'd like to see in terms of accessibility for people with developmental and intellectual disabilities?
Yes, I believe that is accurate to say. I will confirm that is the case. I just had a conversation with Kirsten Murphy the other day about, and I believe that she had indicated that both the DD Council and Green Mountain Self Advocates had been involved in this. And I believe I heard that also from Jen Garabedian, but I will verify if that is not the case. I will let you know.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay. So again, in the interest of time, maybe doing a fly-by-night over the specifics of our programs and services that we have here, as well as some of our results, just to not get bogged down in that level of detail. Additionally, for developmental disability services, we have an annual report that will be forthcoming in, I believe it's February 15th, when that will be submitted. That also has a significant amount of detail in that. So, so I guess that's at the high level there for Developmental Disability Services Division. Rolling into Division of Licensing and Protection, which is also known as DLP, and that is on page 24. So again, not to repeat what I had shared just a couple of weeks ago, but our programs within the Division of Licensing and Protection include survey and certification, licenses and surveys, healthcare facilities to include long-term care facilities such as skilled nursing facilities, assisted living residences, residential care homes, therapeutic community residences, also hospitals, home health agencies, the respite house, and a couple of other provider types like that. And then our Adult Protective Services Unit that investigates allegations of abuse, neglect, or exploitation of vulnerable adults. And implements protective services as necessary. And so again, there's links here to those pages, additional reports, and the high level overviews of who we are, who our partners are, and the work that we are engaging in from the contextual perspective. Just some data about the work that we do. One of the pieces I do want to highlight at the top of page 25, I think I mentioned this last time, is last year we put forth a request to hire 5 additional staff for giving Vermont the ability to do annual reviews for state licensed long-term care facilities. And we are we've hired several of those positions and a couple of them are in the final phases. So we're getting staffed on that, fully staffed on that front and getting staff trained on that body of work. And let's see, one point that I want to share, and I believe I spoke to this when I was here last, but APS in particular has been a recipient of a number of grant opportunities from the Administration on Community Living at the federal level, kind of to include restorative justice program, which, and again, I think I spoke to this last time, so I'm not going to go through it in great detail, but we have service navigators, which are limited service positions to kind of bridge the gap in that we have found that does come up occasionally in adult protective services investigations to help kind of get people to services that they might not otherwise have awareness of or access to. We have parked the positions, the strike team positions that I mentioned previously today, that we are federally funded through the Vermont Department of Health. We are housing those within the Division of Licensing and Protection under APS, but specifically to have that focus there. There's been a lot going on in APS. So in terms of where are we going, updating the APS statute first is a priority, and looking forward to that work. Also, right before the pandemic started in early 2020, we had begun working on an update to assisted living facility and residential care home, the regulations governing those state licensed facilities. And then a little thing called COVID-19 happened, which has a pause on that front, but working to get those regulations back and revised to include lessons learned that we've learned over the course of the pandemic. So getting public meetings on the books for early this year in the spring, and moving that forward.
Madam Commissioner, do you anticipate, when you say update, and noting reflecting the increased needs of people they serve, those increased needs come with increased costs. I know I'm beating a drum here, and I'm just mindful of the fact that while we have on one hand, doing our best regulatorily wise, to provide and protect the health and safety of individuals, and then on the flip side, we're not addressing those facilities' ability to do that with appropriately sourced resources for Medicaid, for people who are served with Medicaid. And so I'm not expecting a response. I just feel like I need to continue to beat that drum because it's an unbalanced approach. Increased regulation reflecting the increased needs of people and no increase in rates to reflect those increased needs and regulations. So it from our side of the aisle, it doesn't make any sense. So we'll be trying to figure out a way to help balance that.
Looking forward to further discussion on that.
You're being very patient with me. I appreciate it.
All right. So let's see. So again, without getting bogged into the details, similarly, more information about the programs and what we do, results in data and
before you just to the next one, just at the top of that page, thank you for the sort of year over year data information. And I'm just curious, no, you had right at there we go, right there. The last bullet about 39 people, that there was a significant decrease in people being placed on the registry. And I'm just wondering if you had a review of procedures or some sort of change there. And I know there's been some work with the Human Services Board about their review and overturning of things. And there's been a bit of stuff happening on that regard. And I'm just, had more reports and more investigations and fewer substantiations.
Right. And I believe we speak to that. I'm just looking at our APS annual report, which we just submitted on January 15th. And I believe that we include the explanation to that. So I'm going to look to plagiarize by stealing from that point specifically. And of course,
maybe
finding it here. So
that's okay. We can table that. We're going to be taking up the APS statute. I'm sure it'll come up in that regard. So, okay. Thank you.
Okay, so moving along to our Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. And again, we underwent a rebranding initiative last calendar year and we are now known as Higher Ability Vermont, which has been really a positive move for us on a number of fronts. Has been very well received from both persons coming in for looking for services as well as employers. So that was really, I'm delighted to share the reception to our rebranding. So speaking to that, again, just from the interest of time, the rebranding, I mentioned that this also has the information about who we are, where we are, who we work with, and some of the priority initiatives that we have. And so where are we going? So specifically for Higher Ability, get to the right page here. So again, while we are focusing at a department level on diversity, equity, inclusion, access, so to include accessibility, the Higher Ability Division who works perhaps most directly with persons, and it's like direct services themselves with folks across the state and in the community, really doing a targeted deep dive to assure that our services within Higher Ability Vermont are truly welcoming and open to all Vermonters, and that all of our practices reflect that we are diverse, equitable, and inclusive, and of course accessible for Vermonters anywhere. So that is a very targeted focus for this particular division. We also were awarded a pretty significant grant from the U.S. Department of Education last year. So we began enrolling folks in August of last year is the Vermont Career Advancement Project. So really partnering with Department of Labor, CCV, BTC, and career and technical education centers to focus on assuring that folks with disabilities can pursue good quality, high quality, good paying careers, and really looking to eliminate some of the barriers to that for that have arisen. And so it's a project, it's a partnership. We'll be collecting pretty robust data on this front for seeing how well that this approach is targeting, how well it is working, and if it's something that we would want to replicate more broadly. Similarly, we've got an initiative called the CTO Career Training Offset, which participants who select to enroll in training to receive industry recognized credentials. So they're paid minimum wage for classroom and instruction time to attain those credentials through this program. And so we're looking to increase that. And again, that's really in alignment with the workforce needs across the state, and getting with the goal of supporting more folks to get into the workforce. And I think we're seeing some pretty promising results there. So again, did you have a question?
No, you whacked it back.
So again, in the interest of time, not going to go into the specifics here that we have about, more specifics about some of our individual programs and partners. Again, we have a significant amount of data and results and outcome information throughout this document. So available for review and consideration. And oh my goodness, we get to the budget. All right, now I need to. All right. I can figure out like how fast to whip through that first part to get to the budget stuff. I just need 1 second to wet my whistle here.
That's okay. Some of the questions that we would have asked during the budget stuff we've already asked, so.
Okay. So, all right, here we start with the numbers, and this is where, let's make sure I have all of my budget notes handy here. So 1 second, please. 24. Okay, I think I'm ready to rock and roll. All right, so this page 35, this is just a snapshot. I'm not going to spend any time on this, but just to say that dividing our administrative costs and grants and programs by division, just for general awareness. And I think I mentioned this briefly earlier, that between developmental disability services and adult services, the programs are those two divisions manage the largest amount of programs in terms of dollars and persons served. And so this is just a snapshot to orient across, so DS, adult services, VR, aka higher ability, Division for the Blind, Visually Impaired, licensing and protection, and the Commissioner's Office, kind of where that sits. So I'm not going to spend time on that, but just a visual representation that we've included in prior years. And then rolling into the changes that are in the budget submission. So this next several pages that I'll go through are by appropriation. I will just start with our Dale administration and support appropriation. So and taking a step back. So what you'll see on this page here, the numbers in the right column are all gross dollars. So for breakout between general fund, special fund, federal fund, et cetera. That detail is on our ups and downs document, which has been provided to, or will be provided to the House and Senate Appropriations Committees. Happy to share that as well here.
I think we have it, yes. It's
Okay, so
posted today if it hasn't already been posted. Yeah.
okay, great. Yes, so this first summary for discussion includes some roll-ups of funds. So, for example, in the administration appropriation, we have a net increase of $4.2 million for salary, fringe, internal service funds. That is the summary of all of the individual line items that are on the ups and downs, to include those items there. The amount for 3 additional public guardians for salary and benefit is in here as it's reflected as $318,000. So I'll say that the number one, the state fiscal 24 net increase, that's for existing staff across for the roughly 300 staff across the department, as well as internal service funds and items that roll up into kind of the usual course of business. The 318 is the new, that would reflect the 3 new public guardians. We have.
Just ask a quick question about that. Last year you requested an assistant director. Is one of these 3 public guardian positions an assistant director?
No, this year it's just 3 public guardians.
So they would have a full caseload?
They would have a full caseload. And the other item that is on in this appropriation is $350,000, which represents the 1 year of a 2-year contract for medical consultation for developmental disability services. So that is a contract that we have engaged in with Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center with clinician to purchase services from a physician, so a medical director who does have expertise in developmental disabilities and mental health and other, because we don't have the in-house medical direction, and that was identified as a gap in our what we have. So we we put out an RFP for that at some point in 2022, like mid 2022, I think, early to mid calendar year, and Dartmouth came back with the bid that we have contracted with.
And so is this specifically around psychiatric services or more general health?
Specifically around psychiatric medical consultation. Right. So the next appropriation that we have here is our Adult Services Division grants. And this appropriation is, let me take a step back just to make sure it's on the record that our Dale admin appropriation includes staff from across our department, regardless of which division they are in. So the remaining appropriations are for programs, grants, et cetera. So the next appropriation is Adult Services Division grants, which include Attendant Service Program, Adult Day, Area Agency on Aging, Older Vermonters services within here. And we have 2 adjustments within this appropriation. One of them is $122,000, which reflects the collective bargaining agreement for independent direct support professionals. That contract had previously been negotiated through June 30th of 2024. And this is the amount for the independent direct support professionals under those programs that would be in here. And then the second item that we have in this appropriation is adjusting the federal funds to more accurately reflect projections for federal funds coming into these programs of $22,000. So that is summary of that appropriation, and I'll keep barreling through unless there are questions.
I just have one question. It'll be reflected in all of the ones that say the AFSCME collective bargaining agreement. That usually sets the basement, I guess, if you will, the lowest. What's the average increase in that? What kind of cost of living increase is that? What would we expect from that for people providing? That's, I won't give testimony, I'll ask you. To maybe not everybody would know what that means. So it'd be helpful if you just provided a little bit of background for people.
Okay, sure. So many people that receive home and community-based services choose to hire staff directly. And so that is through, so not necessarily receiving services under a designated agency or specialized service agency. For example, you might say, oh, I want to have this LNA or somebody, look to hire somebody directly and be the employer of record for receiving services. And the mechanism that we use for that is a contract with ARIS. And does anyone know what ARIS actually stands for? The ARIS?
Area Resources for Individualized Service.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thanks for the help on that. I can never remember what ARIS actually stands for. But they are the fiscal agent that essentially processes Medicaid claims and issues payment to these independent direct support professionals. And the independent direct support professionals are represented through AFSCME, which, oh gosh, should have written.
Yeah, don't ask me that one.
It's a union group essentially that does negotiations for this group of independent direct support professionals. And the state negotiates with AFSCME on, I believe it's a 2-year cycle to determine minimum rates of pay for independent direct support professional services under our programs. And the rate that is negotiated within that collective bargaining agreement is the minimum rate that a person providing these services can receive. In many cases, people they use their Medicaid budgets and might select to hire someone at a higher rate, $25 an hour or something, if that is what they determine appropriate to hire the person that they want. Megan or Bill, do you want to add anything on that summary that I might have missed that would be helpful for folks to have for context?
So what would be what's the percentage? Did I miss it? I'm sorry. The percentage. What's the percentage increase that this?
So Bill Kelly, Dale Financial Director, about 4.5%.
Thank you. Thank you for that overview.
Sure. Thank you for reminding me to have that baseline orientation. Okay, so then moving on to the blind and visually impaired grants. So again, this is not staff. This is not our staff. This is the other costs associated with grants and programs associated with DBVI. Here we just have an item to adjust our federal funds to what to more accurately reflect federal funds anticipated to be received. Moving to our brain injury program. So here we have a projected utilization increase of 2 additional individuals coming in for services, and then a relatively small amount associated with, again, that CBA, the collective bargaining agreement for independent direct support professionals of $8,200.
So just a quick question there. In BAA, I think there was 7 individuals who were served in the BAA. So were some of those just short-term in nature? They didn't carry through?
Yeah, I think that's accurate to say that way.
Bill Kelly. The current utilization is trending a little below what we had asked for in BAA. So I think Megan had spoke to the delay sometimes of folks getting into the program. So, this is our best guess of the need in 24.
Thank you.
Okay. And moving to choices for care, appropriations. So here we have several items. So one is $17.7 million increase for, and this is reflected from two items. One being a inflationary rate increase, which is in statute, and that would be $4.9 million. And then rebasing state fiscal 24 costs for skilled nursing facility based off of 21 actual costs would be $12.8 million. So the total of those two items would be $17.7 million within the Choices for Care appropriation. And then moving to the next item is a point in time when we were constructing the budget. The trends appears to have a slight decrease of 0.5% in nursing home bed day utilization, which would result in a decrease of 718,000. So the next item is a $1.5 million increase, and that represents the ASME CBA for the independent direct support professionals under the Choices for Care program. For number 4, reflecting a $2 million adjustment for the moderate needs program based on trends and point in time projection for state fiscal 24. And then number 5 is a $3 million rate increase for home health agencies. And then the last item within this appropriation is, again, an adjustment in federal funds to more accurately reflect the federal fund projections for this particular appropriation.
Anybody have any questions before I start asking? Okay.
We have half an hour, Madam Chair.
I'm not gonna take that long. I will rely on our very capable team to dig into the deep stuff. But so could you maybe go into a little bit more about the utilization on the moderate needs and what you're showing in terms of your hypothesis, I guess, about that area?
Sure. So I will start, and then I will do the phone a friend to Bill and Megan in the event that they have a more robust explanation to add. But my understanding is that our utilization for moderate needs really went up in a couple of years ago in the beginning of the pandemic, and then. Although, look, I have a little cheat sheet for that. So let me tag you in while I'm looking for that.
So last year, moderate needs, there's basically 3 major line items in the Choice for Care budget, and it's managed as one budget, not by line item. One of those is moderate needs, then highest and high, and then the nursing home component. And the nursing home component's about 2/3 of Choice for Care. Moderate needs and ending state fiscal year 22. I don't have the exact budget memorized, but it's about 6.2 million. And the utilization was $2 million under budget for that line item. So this is we all struggle with trends due to COVID and what'll happen in the future, but both the trend is also occurring in this state fiscal year as well to be consistent with this reduction. we're making a utilization adjustment here to not impact consumer utilization.
So, it might be helpful, so that everybody understands what exactly, what services are contained in the moderate needs group. I'm not sure who to look for.
I can answer that, we can turn you one. The moderate needs program includes services for homemaker, and that's provided through the home health agencies and adult day services. Those are the two main services. There's also some money that folks use, they call it flexible funds, so they can purchase services that might be different with a limited amount of money. They get a small budget for that. And anecdotally, what we've seen with the moderate needs, as Bill was saying, kind of hard to protect through COVID, is that early on in the pandemic, some of those services were considered non-essential. So you may remember that there was a point in time where providers had to focus on the most essential services because of the high, infection precautions and where to prioritize. A lot of what we're seeing now too is around workforce. And we've again heard anecdotally that some providers are still struggling with the workforce piece and providing all of the services that people need in moderate needs. And so if you're a home health agency who's prioritizing, you might prioritize those services that are for people who have higher acuity needs versus homemaker services. That's just one example. The other example is adult day providers are operating roughly at 60% census. And that again is a part of either workforce and finding enough people to do the work, and just consumer hesitancy to participate because we're still technically in a pandemic, and it's a group service. So there's a couple of things that we think are affecting that, but as Bill said, it's a trend that we're trying to navigate without having to reduce services to people.
And again, here comes the drumbeat. Some of these services, it's difficult to provide. And now I realize the homemaker services had an increase in the rate in homemaker services. So that was good. But again, in terms of what we're paying our adult day programs on an hourly basis, for participation is, an issue. And, I guess we will look, our team will look to both the utilization and I think we might have some discussion around are we enabling access? Are we, what are we doing in terms of ensuring that people have access? And could some of those funds, for instance, been used to try to incentivize new programs, or the two programs in Chittenden County that haven't restarted, or the program in Central Vermont, two programs in Central Vermont that, we haven't had the luck, with trying to get them restarted or initiated. And I realize you're trying to balance things. And I realize the moderate needs are not an entitlement group, where highest needs are an entitlement group, meaning we have to provide those. It's just it doesn't, then I think about the flip side and, maintaining a 1% reserve for moderate needs. It's like, it just doesn't seem to compute to me. Is the reserve only for moderate needs, or is that for anybody?
That's for high needs.
It's for high needs. Okay. All right.
If I could just,
Yeah.
not to counter what you just said, but I could add that the Medicaid rates for home and community based last year were increased by 8%.
Yeah.
Which was significant, and I believe 2% the year before.
Yeah, I understand the party line on that. Okay. Those are my questions. Anybody else have any questions on this? overall. And, just for committee members to understand that there is a statutorily required process for nursing facilities. And while we need to have a continuum of care for individuals, that is at the highest cost and highest acuity level of care. And, our job is also to balance the lower levels of care and access to those levels of care so we can reduce the number of high acuity and high cost care. Okay, so we have, you're not planning to go through any of this detailed, are you?
No, but
We'll do that.
Developmental services is the last appropriation.
Yeah, I know.
Right, so yes, and everything else is detail that we historically, provide that, happy to answer questions offline or, but for the rest of the time today, focusing on the detail of the changes within the developmental disability services appropriation. Excuse me. I think I need more water.
Do you have anything?
I do have water.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. A lot of talking. We joked about me developing laryngitis.
Oh. And for Chair of Appropriations does have laryngitis.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Gosh, okay. So for developmental services, I'll run through the 9 changes that we have here. So the first represents caseload. So we are proposing to include funding for caseload for a projection of 353 individuals coming into the program. So 353 individuals at an average of $46,000 equals 16.4 million for caseload. However, as it is an annual process, the equity fund adjustment reflected here is a $8.1 million. It's a 3-year average of what typically gets returned to the pool of available funds. So this would happen after consumers leave a program for they move out of state, they unfortunately die, whatever the case may be. So the resulting increase that we'd be asking for to fund developmental services caseload is $8.2 million, almost 8.3. And then on the public safety caseload, so that includes persons under Act 248 supervision, as well as others who are not, and we'd like to keep it that way, that they're not under Act 248, projecting additional 15 individuals through those caseload buckets at a higher per person cost of $80,000 per person for $1.2 million of caseload associated with public safety. And then, so we had an item in Budget Adjustment Act for what we're calling caseload outliers for individuals either under Act 248 or public safety who have recently come into the system, and their costs in order to assure that they are safely served within the community are we're referring to the costs as outliers because they're the annual cost of $1.9 million for 5 individuals to assure that they're receiving the appropriate services and supports in the community. And that was a BAA item and for a shorter period of time. And then this is a full year amount of the 1.9 million. Number 4 is $1.7 million increase again for the AFSCME CBA for independent direct support professionals. And then number 5 is also a budget adjustment reflected in our budget adjustment. The annual base need for the crisis capacity expansion of bringing 2 additional crisis beds for developmental services online through Upper Valley Services. The budget to actuals realignment. And so That is a $2 million decrease, and that represents that it's an annual process. Our budget is built, a person's budget is built. Our budget is built on the annual needs of individuals coming into services, regardless of when they actually begin receiving services. So if, for example, if a person coming into services in April approved at Equity Committee for April, they would only have 3 months of expenditures in that year versus their budget being approved at the full annual rate. So this is an annual process. It's not a reduction to clients or providers in any way, but the realignment that we have booked is that $2 million. Line number 7 represents, this is an agency strategic alignment effort to stabilize dental services really across the state. Medicaid dental has been, access for Medicaid dental services has been problematic, and the agency, particularly within the Department of Vermont Health Access, is intently focused on this. And so this is a net neutral, moving funds from Dale to DIVA. Mental health is moving funds from DMH for the Community Rehabilitation and Treatment Program, specifically for dental, to DIVA as part of this broader strategic alignment. And that represents.
Can I ask a question about that? Oh,
yes.
Maybe Representative Brumsted has one too. So the governor in his, budget address pointed to investments in Medicaid rates for dental services. And what I'm trying to figure out is, it seems like, are you saying that essentially is net neutral because the other departments and other programs within AHS are actually paying for that increase?
So what it represents as a neutral in Dale's budget. So moving this amount from Dale to DIVA, and DIVA does have an increase overall. So
you're participating in the cost, in the increase, but not funding the entire thing. Is that accurate? Yes, I see Mr. Kelly nodding his head.
That was exactly, I just thought it's interesting. The first good thing is that I feel like your budget, I can actually understand. Yes. I wish I had a serious budget because I understand this. But so it draws the question for me then. It's easier to ask questions because it's so clear.
You understand it.
And it just, a lot of places in the budget, they put in this net neutral. To me, this seems like you all are losing $118,000 to your, division partner, DIVA, who's taking it to use it on dental because we've decided as a overall strategic plan, we need to help out those folks who need dental. And that seems different than net neutral.
Well, you could say that we're purchasing in advance dental services for people in this population.
And it's
I'm just trying to help them out a little bit.
through DIVA, but they'll still get the same service.
Yeah. I don't know. It's
Well, so just to remind people, folks served through Dale, their medical services, including dental, are all paid through DIVA. So, when they go to the doctor, if you have Medicaid, when they go to the doctor, when they go to the dentist, when they go to a specialist or whatever, that's all paid through DIVA. That's, helpful to know that the other departments aren't paying the whole thing, but, because that would be hard to cite that as an investment.
I was just gonna add, for clarity, where we cite AHS budget neutral or department budget neutral, that's specifically referencing the general fund component of the item.
So you're not asking for money. It's essentially not a revenue need.
Correct.
I kind of guessed that in my budget, but it's a lot harder to see than it is here.
Okay. Well, the kudos goes entirely to the folks on the bench and some others for helping to really frame things out, hopefully clearly. Sounds that's good feedback. Thank you. And then let's see. So the next item here. Number 8 is a federal funds adjustment, again, to more accurately reflect projected federal funds coming in. And then number 9 represents, I'm trying to say, the 274,000 of a workers' comp premium increase, and that is associated with additional workers' comp policy costs for the independent direct support professionals paid through ARIS.
So that's related to the AFSCME group of workers, or people around the table. I know it's a small amount considering the overall, but we saw it in a couple of places. When you said federal funds adjustment, so, you know, mostly these areas are funded by Medicaid through Global Commitment. Is there another source of federal funds that was adjusted?
Yeah, so this particular one is the CHIP program.
Oh, okay, Children's Health Insurance Program, okay.
Can I ask a quick question, just came up?
Yes, go
Thank
ahead.
you, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
The commercial policy workers' comp premium increase is interesting, and I question it because the governor's office has put out a press release that says for the 7th year in a row, workers' comp costs are going down. So why are you all paying more?
This is similar to the internal service fund adjustments and admin. And to be honest, I just get, it's dictated to me what the increase and decrease is for these. So I don't have an answer. And I don't even know if they're one-to-one, the same plan. This is for the independent support worker rather than, I think that's a different workers' comp.
It's for Vermont businesses, so.
Right.
Yeah, but it just seems like Vermont businesses are gonna benefit, why shouldn't our state benefit, but anyway, thank you.
And
Questions on this part? Okay.
And then to round out our testimony, specifically, our last appropriation is for vocational rehabilitation / hireability. And we have, again, an adjustment for federal funds, and hireability is the significant recipient of federal funds through a number of streams. So that represents that $3.1 million federal fund increase. And with that represents all of the changes across all of Dale's appropriations, and the rest of the document from this page, there's a couple of pages that has, specific breakouts of health, dental, retirement, like all of that to your for review as you would like. And then again, some performance data, program summary data from page 41 through just about through the remainder of the document, which I will not have time to run through in the remaining 9 minutes. And then at the very end, we have an organizational chart of the department overall, but as requested, you can certainly provide division organizational charts as well.
That'd be great, thank you. So one overarching question, just to, I'm recalling past years, and sometimes these things don't necessarily come up because they're not necessarily like big items, but I'm just double checking to see if there's any elimination of any programs that, or services that, perhaps haven't been highlighted. And one comes to mind is the attendance services program in the past has had that, and I'm just curious if there's anything like that or any of the other smaller programs.
No proposed changes up or down for attendance services, and anything beyond what I spoke about today. There's nothing that I haven't articulated. No.
Okay, great. Any final questions for the commissioner? And Representative Garofano and Representative Noyes will be in touch about setting up some time, and we appreciate y'all being here today and appreciate your patience with our questions and my drum beating very much. And we do appreciate the level of detail and the ease with which we can walk through your documents, and so I appreciate that very much.
Well, great. Well, thank you for the opportunity to come in. I think if I'm correct, we were the first department. You had AHS.
Department.
So, all right, well, I'll tell my colleagues that we smoothed the way for them, all right?
So far, right. Well, actually, Secretary Samuelson broke the ice for you this morning. So, okay, I think committee, we are all set. In 5 minutes, we'll be on the floor, and appreciate everyone being here.